Buongiorno Hong Kong, e mi viene da dire Ni me hao Milano. How you guys doing? Happy to be here for this tasting of Brunello di Montalcino. My name is Filippo Bartolotta. I'm a wine journalist, wine taster. I was born in Florence, not too far away from Montalcino. From Milano, Montalcino will be like 3.5 hours, more or less. So where are we? Let me take you there. Let me tell you what's happening today. Oh, I've got this thing. We'll be having a little bit of an introduction on the area, talking about landscape. Landscape is the first parameter. Landscape tells us everything about a wine. If you go to an area, you see the area, and you should see how the wine will taste like. So I'll take you there. I'll talk a little bit about the geography, the geology, the influence of mountains, volcanoes, rivers, and how all of that comes into play into these glasses of wine. After that, after this introduction, we'll be going into 7 different wines. Today is about the Riserve di Montalcino. I already have had a go with the wines, but you'll be poured the wines in 15 minutes. I wanted to see how the wines were doing because this morning in Milano, last night was 6 degrees centigrade. So I was a little bit afraid that the temperature was going to be too cold. Temperature is fine, actually. So let's begin. Where are we going? We're going to Tuscany. Tuscany is a relatively large region. Montalcino is a tiny little town, one of the poorest. Montalcino has been one of the poorest villages in Italy for decades. So imagine this, you're traveling, you know, everyone knows Florence, north, so you're traveling 1 hour and a half. It takes me 1 hour and 10 minutes. I'm a fast driver. 1 hour and a half, ciao Sissi, 1 hour and a half to get to Montalcino. And as you get from Florence to Montalcino, what you're going to be seeing is this, you go across the Autostrada del Palio, cioè Firenze-Siena, and you will see how the landscape is changing. Going towards Montalcino, as you pass Siena, the hills will become much smoother and way more rolling. The horizons would open up all of a sudden. So we leave the Apennine Mountains and we go towards something that is much broader, much larger. And that already gives us an idea of how Mediterranean this region is. Montalcino is a relatively dry area, one of the driest in Tuscany. And as you drive, I want to take you there. You're going to be seeing like these beautiful, smooth hills. You're going to cross the Crete Senesi, clay hills Calanchi, that would change color according to the season. So you have the gray, super gray soil, where nothing can grow. It looks like as if nothing can grow. It looks as if you were on a moon landscape. But all of a sudden, then you'll be having wheat growing. And when the wheat grows, then you have the beautiful wind that moves it. It really is an emotional landscape. If you were to come from Rome, that's going to be another 2.5-hour drive. Then you will see exactly the same thing approaching Montalcino from Rome. Montalcino is a square. You have the Orcia River, you have the Ombrone, you have the Arbia and the Asso. So 4,000 more or less hectares of vineyards. But within Montalcino, there is so much forest. As a matter of fact, sometimes when I travel there and I have guests from other areas, sometimes they ask me, where are the vineyards? And that's the beauty of Montalcino. Montalcino is like a hilltop village, 600 meters above the sea level. And think about an ice cream cone, a reverse ice cream cone. So you have the flavors, è come se fosse un gelato alla rovescia. Okay, you have the flavors on the ground. Say you have chocolate and vanilla, and you have the cone up there. Here is Montalcino, 600 meters above the sea level. And the chocolate is the clay. Vanilla is our sand. Okay? I'm simplifying it a little bit, but more or less that's what it is. So the northern slopes of Montalcino, the slopes that look towards Florence, towards Siena, tend to be a tougher clay. And as you go south, as you go towards the sea, you tend to have sandier soils. This is as a general rule. And as you go up, so from the 200 meters above the sea level, then you go up, sand and clay, you go up, becomes more what the Tuscans call galestro. What is galestro? Is compacted clay. Is clay compacted throughout millions and millions of years. When you see the northern west slopes of Montalcino, we're talking about what used to be an ocean that is 140 million years old. So the oldest part of Montalcino will be towards the northern east border. And as you get down on the northern west, the southwest part of Montalcino is an area that goes towards the sea. There is a much more direct influence of the sea. 40 kilometers away, like to go to the sea, is going to be taking you an hour. And usually the southwest part of Montalcino has gotten way more Mediterranean approach into the wine. As we move, from the western slopes towards the eastern slope, what happens? I'm still in the south part. So you're still going to be having lots of sand. And as you go up, every once in a while, bear in mind that this is a generic definition, but the main core will be clay and sand with galestro. But as you move, every vineyard, you might come across even arenaria stone. So like the super... Montalcino in a way is a little bit like a summary of Tuscan geology. You have every formation that you come across in Tuscany. But on the southern east side, you have what? The mighty Monte Amiata. 1,700 meters, 1,740 meters above the sea level, an extinct volcano that has had the last eruption around 300,000 years ago, and the landscape has been reshaped by this massive eruption. And as a matter of fact, the southern east slopes of Montalcino tends to be the driest because the volcano, the Monte Amiata, is it's a constant presence. You can see it from everywhere, but on the southern east slopes, it would stop hailstorm, frost, and all the eastern winds that would otherwise be too aggressive towards Montalcino. And then you have the northern east slopes, where still you're going to be going towards the clay, sandier kind of soil. From the northern east, once again we go towards Crete Senesi, towards San Quirico d'Orcia, towards Pienza. And by the way, Montalcino, on the northern slopes, you have this forest. So when you approach from Siena, you will find a beautiful forest. There is a road that cuts through the forest, and it's always you're going to be encountering deer, wild boars. The wildlife there is bonkers. This road through the forest, it's a white road, bellissima. It's going to take you up to Montalcino, okay? And so all the wineries that are along this road will be on the northern east side. Cold, lots of breeze. And then you have, as you get to Montalcino, okay, from Montalcino you can come otherwise from the Pienza side, from the Via Cassia. And then you have, shall we say, two roads. One that goes towards the southwest, towards the sea, La Via Maremmana. And the other road that goes towards, shall we say, the eastern side. Okay, this is to give you, so if you think about this ice cream cone, you can divide it like in 4 sides diagonally. Now that I gave you a little bit of an introduction about that, what is Montalcino? And when I said it was the poorest, one of the poorest villages, you have to imagine after Second World War, nobody wanted to live in the Tuscan countryside. There used to be sharecropping system that finished around the 60s. The sharecroppers were even given the opportunity to get a house for free. It was so poor that really nobody wanted to live there. We're talking about an area that to me looks like an oasis, okay? It looks like all outside Montalcino, it's almost impossible to grow anything. You're gonna have some white truffle on the Crete Senesi. Then here you have the Orcia River, so you have nothing, like there is only forest. And all of a sudden, in this island, in this oasis, you have a group of people, because we always talk about, when we talk about terroir, terroir is also made by people. People in Montalcino are very resilient type, to be kind to them, because they are actually very stubborn bunch. But there is something special about them. They are somehow close to each other. There is a beautiful story about Franco Biondisanti, the man that I've learned so much. I've tasted all of his vintages from the beginning onward. A super gentleman, always with his suit and tie. He looked like as elegant as the cypress tree road that takes to his beautiful place. He used to have a balia, okay, a milk mother. And the milk mother was Miss Baricci. So this Montalcino is a big family. And when the Biondisanti started to make Montalcino, stubbornly, the Clementi Biondisanti started to have an idea that in the 19th century, when Italy was unified, was a very, very forward idea. What was the diversity? What was different from what was happening in the rest of Tuscany and what happened in Montalcino is the fact that this guy decided to produce something only with Sangiovese, which was a bit crazy because nobody ever wanted to have a Sangiovese 100%. Why? So from the area, I'm going to get you closer to the backbone of the wine. Sangiovese is a very temperamental, to put it mildly, variety. È una varietà faticosa. Sangiovese is an early budding variety and a late ripener. Disaster. It's like a nightmare for any winemaker because you are prone to so many incidents, right? Disease, hailstorm, mold, downy mildew, powdery mildew. So how come that they want to make a wine with Sangiovese only? It doesn't come by accident that most wines in the Tuscan area were blended with other stuff. Cannaiolo, Colorino, Ciliegiolo, addirittura even the white varieties, like all over in the world actually, but this is not a class to talk about that, but a splash of Trebbiano and Malvasia in the old Chianti recipe was helping Sangiovese to fix the color. The paradox of using a little bit amount of white wine would fix the color. But Biondisanti said, no, we're going to make something pure, Sangiovese. He started to develop his own clonal selection. First, the muscle selection, so he was looking at the best plants coming from a given vineyard. And then at one point, he got to the point of having a BBS, so Biondi Santi clone, Brunello Biondi Santi clone. When are we talking about? Right now we are in 1865. The beginning Brunellos are around. There are some wines, some labels, even in the 16th century, where people talk about Vino, Brunello, but Brunello di Montalcino arrives with the Biondi Santi. The official label is 1888, but already 20 years before, people are start making Brunello di Montalcino. Why is Brunello become so famous? I was telling you how in the 1960s, you had 12 winemakers. 12 winemakers. In the 70s, maybe there were 16 winemakers. There were a bunch of wineries, Coldorcia, Poggione, Biondi Santi. There was and the smaller wineries, and a lot of people were actually using the big wineries to make their own wine. But the great thing about Montalcino is that Biondi Santi wanted to have everyone to make wine. So 5 years by law, as you all know, 5 years of aging, of which minimum 2 years must be in the oak. And when you go to the Riserve, like today, there is a 6 years minimum requirement. For a lot of people, this is too much. A lot of people say, oh my God, it's too much. You're gonna ruin the wine. How many chances do you have to ruin the wine in the cellar if you keep it for 5, 6 years? A lot. The tradition in Montalcino is the big botti, Slavonian oak barrels. Slavonia is an area in the eastern side, close to Italy in Croatia. It's an oak that is very neutral, and it's been used for centuries. As a matter of fact, Italian winemaking is about big botti. It used to be about big botti. Why? Because it's a Mediterranean country. The hotter the areas, the bigger the barrels got to be. Because when you have the small 225 liters or the Pies in Borgogna 228, you need humidity, you need cold. Because the evaporation is much stronger and the absorption of oak is much stronger. Sangiovese is a thin-skinned variety. Very often we say hold on a minute, I'm gonna go back into the Botti and Barrique. I'm not one of those guys that is against the Barriques, but I'm talking about tradition and why tradition has been that way. The big Botti allow a small relationship between wine and oak, so the ratio is much slower, but also the thickness. Some of the Bottis are like this. Okay, 100 hectoliters of wine. And as a result, the oxygen gets in much more slowly, and you have less influence of the oak. This what used to be in the past. Then all of a sudden, you all know what happened in the 80s with the arrival of, shall we say, more modern winemaking. Lots of barrels arrived, and a lot of chunky, bold, extractive, vanilla-driven Brunello came out in the market that people loved, of course. Now it seems to be that the general trend, whatever winery you're gonna go visit, whether they've been modernist or not, nowadays everyone has gotten back to the big old Botti, maybe together with some tonneau, 500 liters barrels, and some barriques. There are those that still know how to use the small barrels. I was saying about Sangiovese. Sangiovese, think about Cabernet Sauvignon. Everybody knows Cabernet Sauvignon. Dark, this color, tannic, extractive, Schwarzenegger, long aging potential. It's got everything. Cabernet Sauvignon has got everything you want to have. Sangiovese, if we think about, once again, this is not going to be totally scientific, but Cabernet Sauvignon has got 14 layers of skin. If you look at this, if you eat Cabernet Sauvignon, you have to chew for half an hour before you're just gonna get to the pulp, right? Sangiovese is 50% of that. It's very difficult to fix the color in Sangiovese, so do not be afraid. Because for many years, a lot of people, when they were looking at these super bright, transparent, and brilliant, you wanna see colore brillante, right? That is the sign of acidity. Some of the older vintages that I tried from the older wineries, like Coldorcia or Poggione or Biondi Santi himself, or the good old Soldera, or Costanti, the 60s and 70s, when you were looking at the grams per liter, there were 6.4 grams per liter of acidity. It was bonkers. Like the 1964 or 1961 that I had from Coldorcia, these wines are sweet with no residual sugar, and yet they're so like, when you drink them, you just like feel like you're gonna go like a Japanese katana, right? And that is, for me, when Brunello hits it right, you have suppleness, seductiveness, ready to drink. If you are not in the wine trade, what you do with Brunello, you down it because it's good, you down it by the bucket. But if you know about wine, all of a sudden you realize the complexity of this wine. For me, this is what Brunello di Montalcino is about, at his best. At his best, Brunello di Montalcino is easy to drink, aging potential, but also super complex. And the complexity comes from the soil. And I'm about to wrap it up. I'm going to ask my friends over there to start pouring the wines. A few years ago, they found a skeleton of a fossil of an entire whale down the southern west slopes of Montalcino. An entire whale, okay? So when people say, like, when you get the minerality, because today there is a lot of people that get into the wine trade and people say, like, oh, he's talking about minerality, our palate cannot detect minerality, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes minerality is more to do with also an image that helps an understanding of wine. It's not a scientific thing necessarily, okay? Shells, lots of seashells. This is an area where Romans and Etruscans knew about it. As a matter of fact, there is stories that are not told. But a lot of the winemakers in Montalcino, when they were digging to plant their vines, they have found so many treasures. Etruscan treasures. The Monte Amiata was called the sacred mountain. Everywhere there was a volcano, the Etruscans were around the volcano for agriculture. Montalcino it means Mons Ilex, the mountain of the oak trees. There is a lot of forest, there is a lot of oak trees, lots of cypress trees. And where am I taking you right now? Right now, one thing that I want to say, I talked about the 12 winemakers in 1964. Today there are 250 winemakers, okay? And how do I find Montalcino right now? This year I tasted all the Brunellos twice because there was a funny Benvenuto Brunello twice, so I went there twice and I just went double round. Montalcino recently for me has been really, really lucky also with the vintages because 15 and 16 have been blessed by God for sure. Perfect temperatures, 15 a little bit hotter than 16, but pretty much the weather has been dry, beautiful winds, cold nights. So expectations to find in the glass is generosity. And depends where the wine is made. Sometimes there will be more austerity, sometimes a little bit more extraction, and we're gonna look at that together. The value of land in Montalcino, another bonkers things, like I talked about how it used to be one of the poorest villages in Italy. The value of land in Montalcino in 40 years went 3,000%, okay? Now everybody wants to own a piece of land in Montalcino. 1 hectare can easily go to €1.5 million. It's gone a little bit out of hand, but you know what is beautiful about Montalcino? Is that it's an incredibly preserved area, still with a lot of biodiversity. Allora, dove vi porto? Cominciamo con, we begin with Camigliano. Camigliano is it's become an organic estate. Camigliano is not even a cellar, it's a village. With the church and everything, okay? Camigliano is a 13th century castle with some 10th century foundation. It was built in 948. And the funny thing about Camigliano, they have a camel. There is a camel as a logo. And I found out that in Caserta, there is another castle that was built exactly the same date and has got the same distance from Rome. The camel is quite possible that is a symbol of the Crusades. And this borgo è un borgo bellissimo. Walter Ghezzi purchased the borgo in 1957. He was one of the first guys that got there, a guy from Milano, actually. And today we have a Gualto Riserva. There is one thing that sometimes we do not talk too much about is color. Our friends, some talk about color, but sometimes it's more of it's a transparent ruby, blah, blah, blah. But we don't really think about what it means. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, color says everything about a wine. What do we see here? Very clear, transparent. If you had newspaper, you can read newspaper through it. That is Sangiovese when it hits it right. But you have a garnet color going towards the rim. Expectations for me is to find something that is relatively old school. There is no intention from this winemaker to over-extract anything at all, okay? I have to be honest, I have never been a supporter of Gualto because it has always been too much for me, too extractive, too dark, too oxidative in style. But this Gualto is another planet. I believe they changed their approach. They tuned everything down. We're talking about a place that is 530 hectares, 530 ettari di superficie, with 94 hectares of vine. Okay, so it's all about the forest and the vineyards and then this beautiful castle. In terms of, oh my gosh, the nose. I made a mistake. I wanted to carry on, but I got into the nose. You'll see how when I get excited about wines, I get excited about wines, and that's it. We have a representation of different labels, but of course, we all have our own inclination towards something that we like best. What do I like about this wine is the Mediterranean herbs, the cola, but also there is flowers. The beautiful thing about Brunello is when you get these cherries, there is some strawberry jam, gunflint, a little bit of oak-driven spices as well, but I find the wine so perfumed. There is an intensity in these aromas that is not just about the dark fruit. You know, when we drink wine, it's all about the cherries, the prunes, and everything. Here, there is way more in this wine. I find it really, really elegant. Sour cherries, gunflint, something that strikes my mind incredibly is the bergamot, tangerine, blood orange. Ooh, that's the first drink of the day, I guess, for everybody. Giusto? È il vostro primo sorso, il vostro primo goccio. It's always a little bit more aggressive. I've got a lot of alcohol, but I've got tannins. You see how they disappear, how they dissolve like beautiful powder in our palate. There is no traces of dryness or tannic reaction, tannin like astringency whatsoever. I find it juicy, I find it red driven, I find it with a touch of salt right in the end, okay, in the middle of the palate. A volte diciamo, quante volte usiamo sta roba? Ora il salato sta diventando, lo troviamo dappertutto, no? But there is saltiness here. This is the best, for me, idea of all the Southwest. This is exactly South. Camigliano is like this castle, you know, the cypress rose, the big old pines, and then you have these terraces, and you look at a valley that is going to go towards the sea. It's so pristine. The sunset there, you're going to be careful because it's just like feels so much, like so beautiful. And we are right, like the Southwest. We are bordering the corners towards the Ombrone and the Orcia River. 4,000 bottles, produced 36 months in big oak barrels, but this time are French barrels, of like 20, 60 hectoliters, and then 2 extra years in the bottle, okay? We are towards the clay and fossil, some limestone kind of soil, and this Riserve is not a cru, but is a selection in a way of a cru. Is a selection, only 4,000 bottles. And I have to be honest, I think Camigliano in the last 4-5 years has really taken a different avenue towards elegance and less over-extractive power. Vai pure, grazie. Allora, il secondo vino, second wine, is a totally different ballpark. So, from the Via Maremmana on the western slopes, this time we're gonna go, you know when you are, there is a rotonda in Montalcino, like 600 meters. You can go either to the west, in the Via Maremmana, or to the east, towards the Abbey of Sant'Antimo. Fanti è proprio, it's like on that road that goes towards Sant'Antimo on the left-hand side before you get to Sant'Antimo. So in the area of Castelnuovo dell'Abate, where apparently some of the oldest Brunello were found. The Fanti Filippo Baldassarre got there in the 70s, and they say that they found documents talking about this Brunello label that goes back to the 16th century. We are 250 meters above the sea level, 55 hectares, mainly galestro driven, so there is this schisty kind of soil. You know my friends in Hong Kong, I don't know if you're still there because I can't see you, ma abbiamo gli amici qua. Il galestro is a stone that you can take it, like if it looks like almost like a paper, and you can crush it. Okay, if you get galestro, like with your bare hands, you do tuck, and it's gonna be cracking. And think about what the roots of Sangiovese have to do. They have to cut through that galestro and go deep, deep, deep to look for water. Some of these vines have to go as down as 10 meters underground. Something else that I forgot to say earlier on, it's forbidden to use any irrigation in Montalcino, like most Italian DOCGs. And to be honest with you, even if it was possible, there is no water to irrigate. So some people do have irrigazione di soccorso, so like safety irrigation in case there is a strong drought. Qualcuno ha l'irrigazione di soccorso, però non c'è così tanta acqua, okay? So only the best sites can actually give you wine. And then I find it incredible because we're talking about, a lot of people talk about sustainability, and then there is irrigation all over the chart. In this case, 90%, some appellations have got 97% of irrigation. You know, is it fine? But like I think if you need so much help, maybe you shouldn't make wine over there. But that's another chapter. Fanti, allora questo è un vino completamente diverso, lo vedete, it's much different, scusami, it's more opaque, less bright, looking at the color already, so I'm expecting a wine that is not going to be as refreshing. On the nose, it's totally different, it's more about the black fruit, this is all about the prunes, dry figs. It's so much. It tastes, there is some Barolo tarriness to this wine, c'è una parte proprio di petrolio that is very petroly. This kind of wine, you either like it or you don't, like it's very extractive, very dark, it feels like dark fader. It's like the dark force, right? C'è questa forza scura, nera, tobacco, lots of tobacco, lots of goudron, and licorice stick. Like the nose is all about this super dark, super fall, autumn, the forest floor. And there is some the licorice stick right now, just like it's all about the licorice. Let me try the wine on the palate. Oh my God. Ooh. Lots of alcohol. Lots of raw matter. Lots of tannins. We're struggling a little bit more here. 2.5 hectares only. These guys, Filippo Baldassare and his wife, for the Riserva, it's called Vigna Macchiarelle, they grab only 30 tons per hectare. Okay, so it's basically 50% of what, less than 50% of what you could get from the appellation. 30 months in the tonneau, a little bit of these oak tannins that come on the palate. The wine has been played in an extractive mode, very different style. Okay, this one here, I think is screaming for some roasted pigeon, un po' di pigeon. You need some protein here to break down some of these tannins. I don't know, the five layers roast pork that you guys have in Hong Kong. Oh my God, I love Hong Kong food so much. I think this you need some meat, lots of meat. Wild boar, pappardelle with wild boar would be smashing. You need some a lot of meat. We are in Milano, un bel risotto con il bone marrow. Bone marrow, l'ossobuco, no? Qui avete bisogno proprio di romperla questo tannino. Quindi a much darker style wine. Very extractive. I think I'd be curious to see how this wine is going to be playing in 15, 20 years, because right now, for me, is a little bit too much on its dark corner, okay? Numero 3. Talenti, we're still south, va bene, però from Montalcino, you can choose to go towards the Sant'Antimo side or the Castelnuovo dell'Abate. So here, we're still going south, there is, look, Camigliano, Fanti, and Talenti. We are exactly the same height, roughly 300 meters above the sea level. These guys are from Emilia-Romagna. He used to be like a biker, okay? And very fun guy. He's got a lovely Cinquecento with an open roof that I stole from him once to go around Montalcino feeling like in the 1950s. And Pierluigi is the father that started all of it, actually the zio. And Riccardo is there nowadays making wine. You imagine to get into this stone house in this beautiful valley. You turn to the right, you get into the stone house, and it looks like a little heaven with all the wisteria flowers. Modern winemaking, he loves to play the old school, new school card. Big oak, Slavonian oak, cask and French, and as well as Tonneau and Barrique. 50% of both, 24 months, so 2 years in Tonneau, and 50% of the wine goes 2 years in Tonneau, and the other 50%, 20 hectoliters. Someone is warming the wine up because the wine has been tonight here, it was 6 degrees. Però io preferisco un po' più freddi che si scaldano che caldi. Però ha ragione, guardando quel ragazzo laggiù in fondo, forse maybe the second wine would benefit from a little bit of a higher temperature. But we're still with Talenti. Come viene fatta questa riserva? You know how when we talk about riserva, there is a lot of people that say Riserva in Montalcino is made only when they don't sell the wines, okay? But not today, Zerg. Like not today, like Riccardo only makes this wine when he believes is a good time to make it, and he's gonna select the best grapes to make this wine. So only special vintages, only the oldest vines, 40 years old. By the way, we're all around the price tag around 40 to 60 euros in general so far. If there is something that shoots over this price, I will let you know. Allora, in questo caso al naso it's as if we had a bit of a combination of the two. Not because it's in the middle, but there is a little bit of that flowery note, the red berry crush, together with the prunes, tobacco, leatheriness. But also there's a whiff of peppermint, of menthol, more balsamic, like pine sap. I like about this wine that there is a good energy. Without wanting to do it, I had a little sip. The wine goes straight into your throat, so lots of energy. You see what's happening here? There is more. There is some sapidity. There is some juiciness. There is more acidity. It's a brighter wine. We're chewing a lot of fruit here. We still have some raw material that were left on our gums. But see what happens? If you wait, we're still creating saliva. Still now, stiamo ancora lavorando il vino, no? When we talk about persistency, that's persistency, okay? Parliamo di persistenza. Questo è un vino che ancora adesso, still now, is giving us fruit to chew. So I am placing a lot of bets for this wine in terms of aging potential. I think some of these reservas can be a little bit austere. The Gualto was actually relatively ready to drink. Let's move on to number 4 because I think I got carried away with all these descriptors. Sasso di Sole, Terzuoli. Okay, you remember our Quadrato in Montalcino? From here, okay, this is the appellation. We had Camigliano, we had Fanti Talenti, and now we're going, ping, right the northeast bottom of Montalcino. Sasso di Sole, a small winery, 10 hectares, northern east, lots of clay that goes towards the sandiness. Only 3,500 bottles here. Terzuoli family, they have this stone house from the 17th century, very beautiful. The wine here is less on the earthiness, less on the balsamic elements. Is, to be honest, less Riserva style. Is more on the vanilla, cherries, strawberry. It's kind of like on the mild. There is a bit of caramel. I get this caramel, a little bit of coconut, a little bit of vanilla on the palate right now. The wine is going all like this. You get a sip, you get the cherries at the beginning, and now it's all going towards the front of our palate, right? It's all here right now. So it's a little bit on feeling like when you had a cup of tea, you go take your shower, and you enjoy your shower, you go back to your cup of tea, you forgot your tea bag, and you go drink your tea, and you go like, right now we are in that position for a moment. So at this point, what I would love to have is some hot pot. Once again, Hong Kong comes back. Non so se avete mai provato il hot pot. A Milano c'è un ristorante, vero, di cucina Hong Kong. I need something, once again, more proteins. There is a fibrosity on the tannic structure of this wine that is claiming for proteins. You know how proteins break down the tannins and the wine becomes smoother. The Romans knew too well. When they were selling wines, they were actually always have a piece of cheese next to it. So you buy the wine, you think it's smooth, you go back home and you go like that. But this Sasso di Sole, I think, needs a little bit more time. Has gone through 3 years of large Slavonian oak cask, a more subdued in terms of nose. Okay, didn't have all the tertiary aromas that you're expecting from a Riserva. But when you get into the palate, then all of a sudden the wine becomes much more austere than expected. Allora, muoviamoci adesso con we're moving to Palazzo. Riserve 2015, sorry, every once in a while I check if there is a mistake. Anche questa bottiglia is around 65 euros. Scusate, questo è il numero 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Color, once again we go into the lighter. You see even the other one has got a darker color, lighter, more garnet kind of color. Where are we with these guys? We are going towards... This family is a Scottish family. It's an Italian family that lived in Scotland and got back to Montalcino. They fell in love with the area. In 1983, Cosimo Loia, this is funny, Cosimo Loia purchased a place called Palazzo. And he married to a wife whose surname is Palazzo. So he got a wife and a castle with the same name. 320 meters above the sea level. We are a little bit underneath the Camigliano side. Okay, so once again, we're going southwest. The wine spends 30 months in 25 hectoliters big botti, and another 10 months in tonneau. So altogether it goes for 42 months of barrel aging. What else can I remember about these guys? They do fermentation and malolactic in concrete tanks. 10 hectoliters concrete tanks, quindi fanno la fermentazione avviene in cemento. It's a little cellar, beautiful stone Tuscan house with the cypress trees and everything, and a small, tiny, very clean garage cellar. In this case, we are in some of the oldest soils of Montalcino. Okay, these vineyards are placed in some of the oldest soil of Montalcino. I am enjoying the wine a lot. 2,000 bottles. I think this winery has been growing a lot. They used to make wines that were a little bit on the more rustic style, but I think in the last few years they moved up the ladder, making a wine that is more refined. I love on the nose the presence of these, the presence of flowers, of cola. There is roots, like there is la cola, proprio il profumo di cola è bellissimo in questo vino. Rhubarb, a little bit of coconut. Black cherries. This is like pure black cherries and blackberries. Very smooth, very voluminous wine. Un sacco di volume. A lot of fruit to chew. There is tannic structure, but there's lots of sweetness. This is a dry wine. There is good sweetness. A little bit of tannins, but you see what's happening? We are digesting this tannic structure pretty well, I believe. You don't have too much stuff that is making your lips astringent. There is juice. Even now, I'm still going for a lot of juice in this wine. I would wait. This wine deserves to be kept for a little longer. Salt, some spices. And moving on, sto guardando il tempo. Moving on the sixth wine, we're going to Argiano. Quindi Palazzo, Southwest, the bottle goes in the market for 65 euros. I'm in the mood for chicken feet now. Questo vino è molto diverso dagli altri, very different. Sage flower, broomstick, qui c'è proprio la saggina del Sangiovese, no? È proprio... Saggina in inglese, se me la dici anche a me, perché I only have a broomstick, no? Va bene broomstick? Flower, the yellow flower, la ginestra, okay? Quindi broom flowers. And on the nose is more about the pomegranate, the mountain strawberries, the red small fruit. There's nothing dark about this wine. It's a totally different ballpark. Dove siamo? Siamo con una tenuta bellissima, che è la tenuta di Argiano. Siamo molto a sud, south of Montalcino, a beautiful tenuta, Etruscan, when you go there, from Montalcino, you drive south, and at one point you turn right, and there is this road. Okay, there is a road with the vineyards here, vineyards there, and a phenomenal, clean horizon, tutto buio, darkness. I once played a game of just asking, I was driving there with a friend, and I said, like, isn't this beautiful? I just switched the car off, the lights were off, it was super dark, and then you feel like, it felt like we were like in a wolf area. And the feeling of walking in the dark in that place, it really is staying with me for the rest of my life, because I was shitting my pants. It was like really scary, like darkness, but it's so beautiful. You have 360 degrees integrity of landscape, one of the most beautiful sunsets in the planet. This fantastic 15th century villa that was purchased from Noemi Marone Cinzano by a group of Brazilians that fell in love with the place, and they moved the cellar, stepping up the game. 2015, 2016 vintage. I find it very, very supple, very elegant. They have state-of-the-art cellar. There is a little bit of licorice, a little bit of leather that comes through the wine right now, together with the more red-driven fruit. I wonder what Ersilia Caetani Lovatelli, the owner of the 18th century of this place, would think about this wine now, because I find it ancora questo lato di radice, no? There is this roots feeling in this Brunello di Montalcino that I tend to be quite seduced by it. I love the cola, I love the rhubarb. The tannic structure is quite intense, but there is also sweetness that comes through the palate, beautiful sapidity elements. We are 300 meters above the sea level, 36 months in Slavoniano cask, quindi botti grandi, plus 2 years in the bottle. Ok, quindi questa è una riserva that is chosen from the best site of the vineyards. What can I say about this wine? It's very opulent in an elegant way. Okay? È un vino opulento, però è anche elegante allo stesso tempo. And it's all about the sapidity. Right now, my mouth is getting a little bit dry. You need something to eat. The Chessiu Bao would be perfect. I just put some notes because I miss the Hong Kong cuisine so much. Sooner or later, we're going to have more. Time is running up. I want to leave some room per la sala qui a Milano e per Hong Kong. Quindi vi porto, I'm going to take you to the last leg of our journey. We're moving to Coldorcia, one of the southern west most wineries of Montalcino. Another one of those stories where Sant'Angelo in Colle used to be a farm, okay? That was purchased by a Florentine family, the Franceschini, in the 1800s. And then the two brothers split apart, and with one rule: they couldn't call their wineries, okay, with the name of Sant'Angelo, the Fattoria di Sant'Angelo. So one took a name and it became Il Poggione. The other farm became called Dorcia because you are on a hill overlooking the Orcia River. Alberto Marone Cinzano, who's the father of Noemi, of Argiano earlier on, in 1973 purchased the land. Today is Francesco, one of the I think Francesco is one of the faces of Montalcino, a super elegant gentleman, always ready to crack open a bottle for anyone. old vintages. He's very fond of Moscadello, which, thinking about Francesco Marone Cinzano, Il Conte Francesco Marone Cinzano, I'm thinking about Moscadello. He's very fond of Moscadello. Moscadello is the wine that used to be the wine of Montalcino. And this is a crazy story because everywhere in Tuscany, people make Vinsanto, okay? Drying grapes on wooden shelves. But in Montalcino, there is no Vinsanto, only Moscadello. Moscadello, which is like a dessert wine, sweet but not too sweet, with lovely acidity. And if you go to Coldorcia, you'll come across to some really old vintage, like the 1980s and 1990s of Moscadello. You'll be surprised how these wines are alive and kicking. But going to the Brunello, you think about going into a wine estate that is a massive wine, one of the biggest in Montalcino. It's 108 hectares of Brunello, 140 hectares of vine, massive property with all the big oak cask. So most of the wines will be aged in big oak cask. It's turned organic in 2010. But Francesco is started to follow a little bit the biodynamic inclination, shall we say. 30 years for this wine, 3 years of Allier and Slavonia, 25 and 75. 75 barrel is like the size of this screen, okay? 75 hectoliters barrels. 3 years of oak and 3 years of bottle for one of the most renowned Riserva in Montalcino. Usually, these Riserva tend to be always quite tough at the beginning. It's like a very austere Riserva. The vineyard is one of those places of the mind. There is an oak tree that is as big as this tasting room, with like super long branches, that it feels like you somehow, a piece of us belong to that oak tree. And then all the vineyards just go all the way down towards the orchard, always kissed by this beautiful mild wind that comes from the sea. So the Orchard River is actually channeling up the sea. I mean, the sea breeze is a bit of a stretch, but the winds of the sea. Allora, questo è there is always this lovely combination of coconut, some exotic fruit even. There is like a hint of passion fruit just when you open it. I know that when we talk about red wine, it could be difficult to think about it, but if you close your eyes, you have a little bit of that, a little bit of raspberries, sour cherries. Here, when you of course you do, when you open an orange, there is like blood orange, the orange peel, but also a hint of white truffles, of mushrooms, leatheriness. I have to be honest, I've always found Poggio al Vento a little bit too austere when released in the market. This vintage is, you see how sweet, senza dolcezza, no? È proprio il dolce che ti dice, there is this feeling of, once again, of the roots, the cola, balsamic, touch of nutmeg. There's something that is about tea tree oil, bergamot. Is very balsamic wine. The tannins are there. This is an austere Brunello. This tannic structure is like almost like the fortress of Montalcino, the 15th century fortress, right? Boom, boom. Very, very, very sturdy, very well placed on the ground. You need time for this wine. But the sweetness that is, the hint of sweetness that is coming right now for me is a window on what this wine could be in 10, 20, 30 years. Credo che sia veramente for me, one of the most focused Poggio al Vento that I've ever tried, and I've tried many of them, but I think this year they managed to add this extra level of natural sweetness in the wines that I've never seen. Amici, io ho finito. We ran out of time. Questions for everyone. Come siamo messi a domande? Cosa vi è piaciuto? Mi date un feedback, so che Sissi di sicuro mi darà un feedback. Domanda, feedback, anche da Hong Kong se avete domande. Parti te Sissi, ormai ti ho lanciato la...
Volentieri, grazie. Ma io ero... Allora, sono molto d'accordo con te, ti chiedevo dov'era però l'ultima azienda, dov'è?
Col Dorcia? Col Dorcia è qua. Ok? Sì, non so perché ci hanno dato una mappa dove non c'è. Comunque
Pronto?
qua, è proprio in fondo.
Ok, grazie. No, poi l'altra domanda era, così è proprio first sip, no? Cioè al primo assaggio, l'impressione è a caldo è che nella parte nord ci sia in questo momento minor corrispondenza fra naso e bocca. Allora, volevo capire...
Minore, hai detto?
Sì,
Sì,
cioè
sì.
sento più coerenza negli altri fra naso e bocca, quindi volevo capire se è un'impressione o se è una sensazione che già ci comunica una maggiore prontezza da parte di questa zona e cosa invece succede negli anni, cioè se mantengono, cioè se sono arrivati a un livello che poi mantengono o se calano, salgono, cioè cosa succede proprio in longevità, visto che stiamo bevendo delle cose veramente giovani, giovanissime. Sì. E anche poi una considerazione sull'aspetto alcolico che tu facevi presente prima, sì. E quindi anche questo se è una qualche cosa che anche lì ha un limite o se... Perché la sensazione per esempio di pienezza, di dolcezza che tu parlavi in Col d'Orcia penso che dipenda anche appunto dall'alcol e dagli alcoli superiori, quindi questo già complessità che avanza.
Allora... you better be careful what you wish for. Sissi mi fa un intervento and now it's like a university class. Let's begin. No, allora... scusate, nel frattempo è stata tradotta, vero? Was she translated? Okay, so our journalist here in Milano asked us about the northern versus the southern slope. She says that she believes that there is more the nose and the palate of the southern slope seem to be more together than the northern part. And the other consideration was regarding the alcohol and the age input. So if the sweetness comes from the higher alcohols and if the sweetness also comes from that, and what's going to happen in terms of aging potential. My answer, of course, I'm not Montalcino. We only have 7 samples. Quindi talking about northern slopes, southern slopes, when you have so much heterogeneity in terms of winemaking, so people that are using the tonneau, etc., is not that easy. In general terms, northern sloped wine tend to be having more of a floral, tougher. They tend to be less generous and sweeter on the palate to begin with. Alcohol, 2015, the alcohol is always there. I just checked the data. It's all about 14, 14 and a half, 15, 15 and a half. So alcohol is an issue. I like low alcoholic wine. If I drink Brunello of the 60s, it's 12 and a half in alcohol. But to be honest, that is true for Napa Valley. The famous judgment of Paris, they were judging the 1974 vintage in Napa and in Bordeaux. 1974 Napa, which is phenomenal today still, Heinz, Martha's Vineyard, wines like that, were 12 and a half in alcohol, and they're still alive. So alcohol for me is a bit of a monster to tame, and everyone knows in Montalcino. So some of the southern slopes have got maybe more traditional expectations of what you expect from a Brunello. So right now there is more, I agree with you, there is more cohesion from the nose, between the nose and the palate. Devo dire effettivamente that the northern slopes, in this case, these samples were a little bit detached dal naso alla bocca. Aging potential. tough to say, because I crack open quite a few Brunello. There are not many more out there, unfortunately, perché stanno sparendo, gli anni 60, gli anni 70, the 1980s. The fact that we're still enjoying some 1961, 64, 67, of course the mighty 1985, where even the mice, anche i topi a Montalcino, hanno fatto un vino buono nell'85. I don't know what's going to happen to this wine, whether the alcohol is going to eventually burn out a little bit of the more delicate aspects of the wine. It's difficult to say. It's something that we're talking about in all regions of the world, right? Like, so I don't know. But my feeling is that there, like for instance, the Gualto was somehow a bit too ready to drink for Via Riserva. I loved it because Gualto has always been like a very different wine. So I encourage this kind of winemaking, però forse questo in terms of aging potential non lo so. Aveva una bella acidità, eh? That's the other thing. Acidities are quite high, so maybe that be counterbalance. Altre domande? Sì. Abbiamo Hong Kong intanto, c'è qualcuno da Hong Kong? Sono tutti... Okay.
Dalle immagini ho notato che le coltivazioni della vigna è a vite alta. Nel sud dell'Italia si usa di più la coltivazione bassa. È una condizione indispensabile per il Brunello o può essere coltivato anche a vite bassa?
Assolutamente. So the question here in Milano was, he saw, this gentleman saw in the images a lot of high-trained vines, and so he's asking, is the southern Italy tends to have more of a lower-trained vines, and if this is a condition of Montalcino, the answer is no. It's not a condition in Montalcino. There is a lot of Guyot right now. People are moving a lot towards Guyot. A lot of cordon spur. Images that you've seen were given by the Consorzio, and I think it was just the fact that they just grabbed the image of a higher trained cordon spur, but it's not something that is common to the area. Le ho risposto? Ok. Come la trovate? Come avete trovati? Diciamo, where is your heart going? Cioè così per capire un po' se siete più sullo stile, come dire, if you guys are more on the rounder or the darker side, ok? Dov'era? Fanti? Come curiosità della sala. Sì, sì. Sì, è vero. Ok. Too tough. So you're going for a smoother, rounder, southern sloped style Montalcino.
I also like the coconut butter feeling.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very good.
So you tend to go for something that is fair enough, more ready to drink. Above all, in the morning without any food, those wines tend to be kind of like smoother, rounder, sweeter.
Yeah.
Grazie.
Thank you.
Se non c'è Hong Kong, io continuo a stare con Milano per capire un po' com'è andata. Ok, allora bye guys, arrivederci a Hong Kong, grazie per essere stati con noi, grazie anche a Milano ragazzi per avermi ascoltato con tanta attenzione, grazie. E a questo punto diciamo, quindi che altro, come l'avete trovati? Un po' duri, un po' rigidi forse alcuni di loro? Ah, la signora quindi va per estrattivo, catramoso, la forza scura. Il 3, ok, talenti che combina un po' di eleganza e di coso. Laggiù andiamo sul 5, quindi con Argiano dolce più pronto. 5